Do you want your art to stand out? If you're gonna spend hours on it, obviously you do. In this week's YouTube Art School episode, I'll go over 6 easy tricks to dramatically enhance your artworks with very little effort. Simple stuff, most of it having to do with presentation. Tricks some other pros use, tricks I always use to make sure I get the most eyeballs on my art as possible. Ready to make your art look pro even if it isn't? Keep watching, class is starting. Alright, class is in session. Pay attention. And the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub, it's a small price to pay to make your art look pro. Now I'll go over 6 different tricks that will change your art forever for the better. I think the best part is how quick and easy they are to apply, taking no more than like 2 to 3 minutes each at most if you take your time. Can't beat that kind of value. And let's get right into the first trick for when you have a finished line drawing that you want to show off. Like this one, maybe. The most telltale sign that you're not pro will be in the quality of your line art. Therefore, drawing clean line art is an easy way to stand out. I'll rarely draw my lines once and move on. Usually, it takes a couple of tries to get each one just right. Don't be scared to give it multiple tries, like I have been doing here. We want to avoid hairy lines, focusing on long, continuous lines, breaking the flow only when needed. You'll want to be using quick, controlled brushstrokes for that, and it's easier to mess those up if you go quick, but you kind of have to go quick to avoid wiggles in the line. So just make sure that it's a habit to use Ctrl-Z until the line is just right. It really doesn't take that much extra time, and it will make your line art look much better, much more solid, much more controlled. That's not really the trick though. Most of you probably realize clean, confident lines look better. The trick in question just works better with clean line art, and it is to emphasize the silhouette with bolder lines. Every time you have an object or a body part in front of something else, you should try to emphasize its silhouette lines a little more over the other lines, making them thicker. This will improve your line drawings like crazy. The arms here are in front of the rest of the body, so I'll thicken the outlines a bit more to make it clear that it's in front, and to make sure that it stands out from the other lines that are not as important, like the details. And just like things appear to get smaller when they get further away, well, the line thickness will follow the same logic. Bolder lines for silhouettes closer in the scene, and thinner lines for those farther away. You don't want thick lines for any of the details though, like I said, so don't worry about the lines within the silhouette, only the contour lines. There's a lot more that we can do to this drawing to make it stand out still. The second trick will be all about line presentation. The first thing I'll do is create a selection for the entire silhouette of my drawing and give it a super subtle color. Very light, almost white. This way, we don't lose any of the details. But it also helps us read the overall body shape much better, or for whatever it is that you're drawing. So in this case, I'll just have a layer on top of my line art that I'll set to the multiply blend mode. From here, I'll go and duplicate my line art layer and blur it a few pixels. This kind of gives a buttery feel to the lines, and it'll help emphasize all the details better. It's usually too intense though, so I'll typically drop the opacity of that new layer to about 30-ish%. Now, I don't like having the blurriness be visible outside of my silhouette, so I can Control-click the flat color layer to select its content and invert it. And with that inverted negative selection, I can erase everything, well, that's not within the silhouettes. Big brain stuff. And it's much cleaner this way, much better. Now, actually, one more thing before I'm done with my line art. I'm ready to add some layer styles to my new color layer here. So the first one that I'll add is an inner shadow to emphasize the silhouette even more. Just, pure black with low opacity, and then make sure it's not too thick. And then I'll add a second one, a reddish inner glow with very low opacity again, but with a spread that reaches a little further into the silhouette. It's subtle stuff, but I think you'll agree that these changes so far definitely improve the line art. Now, the last line art related trick will be to help with the read, guiding the eye of the viewer to the focal point of our drawing, aka the head of the characters usually. For this, I'll just add a subtle gradient from the bottom of the drawing using a large soft brush. I'll just paint it over the new layer where I've added the light color already, making sure that I lock the layer first, not to paint outside of the silhouette. This works with simple drawings like this, but it's actually something that I recommend for any character drawn or painted. Just adding a bit of a darker color towards the bottom of the character helps dull the color. And, well, in turn, it helps the colors around the face of your character seem more vibrant in contrast. That's a trick that I actually picked up while working at Blizzard, and you'll see this a ton on characters from their games. Darker, more desaturated colors towards the bottom of the characters, towards their feet, and much lighter and vibrant colors towards the top, towards their face. Now, I do it for all of my characters, whether they have colors or not, it just looks much better. And tricks aside for a second, if you want to really level up your art, as in, get to a level where you can draw or paint literally anything that your mind can imagine, you should check out my art program like 16,000 other students have done so far. It's the project that I'm most proud of in my life, and luckily it's on sale right now for the biggest discount of the year, valid until the end of the month only. The price goes up over time as I add more content, so don't wait too long if you've been considering it. The link is in a video description and you should definitely check it out. You won't regret it. Now, the fourth trick will be to colorize your terminators. This is something that I went over in a recent class about painting skin, but adding a tint to the terminator, aka the small transition between the shadow and the highlights in your shading, will give a super rich look to your colors. So it doesn't work for skin only, like this. Much nicer. And for this reason, I always paint the lighting in my paintings on a separate layer. In Photoshop, you can easily add something called inner glow, it's another layer style, to get your terminator tinted in just seconds. You can pause this to copy the settings that I use if you want, they work pretty well. And if you're using a different software, like Clip Studio Paint, Procreate, well, you can still do it relatively fast unless you want to manually paint it in. All you gotta do is duplicate your lighting or light layer and consider the layer below as the terminator now. If you make the lighting layer just a bit smaller, which you can do by selecting the content of that layer and shrinking the selection, all you gotta do then is erase the new smaller selection from the terminator layer to be left with just this. So the light up top and right below the terminator. And voila! Easy way to make your coloring pop a lot more. And don't hesitate to adjust the colors for certain areas to make this look even better. The logic here should be that the terminator is just a slightly darker, warmer, and more saturated version of the highlight color for, any given area. All right, the next trick will help you get rid of your muddy shading without using anything too fancy. You can also do this in any painting software. So typically, I'll usually recommend shading with black to focus 100% on the shading and not be distracted with anything else. But the thing is that you can't just leave it at that. One step a lot of you often forget is that you gotta tint your shading layer once you're done with it. That's the trick. Here I have my typical stack of layers, the shading and the flat colors on top. But it looks muddy, right? The shading layer is black, so it's just adding black to darken the colors, which is not the most aesthetic way to go about it. Instead, you'll first want to make sure that you don't have any pure black on that layer. You can't tint pure black, obviously. So I'll just go in my settings here and increase the lightness just a tad, which adds white to everything. Again, just a little bit. Now, if I color balance this layer, well, I'll be able to get a good result. I don't have any black anymore, so I'll just be tinting like a really dark gray, which will work. Usually a warmer tone will work pretty well for everything, but you can also select different, sections like we did with the Terminator and tint those differently if you want. I'll usually do this if I'm not using gradient maps to colorize my shading layer, which happens sometimes. And a foolproof way to get good results with this is to slightly tint the shading the same color as your main color for any given area. Much better. You can see what the shading layer alone looks like here. That's good. Do this. Don't keep it black unless you're gonna colorize with gradient maps. And finally, the last trick will be to master your glows. This is something that I see being done wrong all the time. To make something glow, like a special effect or just a bit of glare here and there on some armor piece, for example, you gotta use the right blend mode. Normal blend mode just does not cut it, nor do the overlay or color dodge blend modes. Those are for peasants. The only blend mode that you want to use for glows is hard light. It's a little like overlay. It brightens up the colors, but it has a little bit more opacity, I guess, which works perfect for this stuff. check this out. Hard light blend mode activated, and on a separate layer, I'll just go and lightly paint this in using the same local color with a soft brush. This works great on top of highlights to simulate glare, like, you know, looks nice. And like I said, you can also paint some cool effects with this. So let's say I have some sort of magic effect I want to create. I'll just go ahead and duplicate this layer to blur it. Not great so far, you know, but the second that I change to the correct blend mode, which we know is hard light, boom, magic. Literally. Same idea if you have a light source in your scene, like a candle or something similar. As long as the layer is set to hard lights, you'll get super nice and really easy glows, just like the pros do it. And that's gonna wrap it up for this week's class. These are some easy tricks that will have an immediate effect on your art for very little effort. Don't work hard. Work smart, but work hard too, I guess. Do both. And if you're still here, well, you get free brushes. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and click the link in the video description to download one of my 2 main brush packs for free for being a good student and following until the end. These are some of my favorite brushes, including the one that I always use for my Lineart, like I did at the beginning of the class. I use them all the time. I hope you like them. And I hope this class was helpful. Let me know in the comments. See you next time.